When the doctor told me I had 6 months to a year left, my first thought wasn't about dying. It was about the lie I'd been living for 52 years. Sitting in that sterile office in Asheville, with the autumn light filtering through the blinds and the smell of antiseptic burning my nostrils, all I could think was, I'm 73 years old, and my daughter still doesn't know she had a twin sister. My name is Dorothy Mae Henderson, and I've carried this secret like a stone in my chest since 1973. Every birthday Rebecca celebrated, every Mother's Day card she gave me, every time she wondered aloud why she always felt like something was missing in her life, I knew. I knew exactly what was missing. I knew, and I said nothing. That's going to change today. Some people might say I should take this secret to my grave, that after all these years, what good could possibly come from opening old wounds? But here's what I've learned in my 73 years on this earth. Secrets don't die with you. They live on in the empty spaces between people, in the questions that never get answered, in the feeling that something important has been left unsaid. And I refuse to leave my daughter with that emptiness when I'm gone. The cancer is in my lungs, which is ironic because I never smoked a day in my life. Stage 4, the doctor said, with that practiced gentleness that medical professionals develop when they have to deliver death sentences regularly. It spread too far for treatment to make much difference. I could try chemotherapy, but it would maybe buy me a few months at the cost of spending those months sick and weak. I chose quality over quantity. I chose to spend whatever time I have left making things right. But before I tell you about the revelation that's about to shake my family to its core, before I explain how I plan to find the daughter I gave away and reunite her with the daughter I kept, I need you to understand something. I need you to understand how a 21-year-old girl in 1973 could make a choice that would haunt her for the rest of her life. I need you to understand that I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm not sure I deserve it. I'm just asking that you listen to the whole story before you judge me. And if you're someone who's watching this because you have your own secrets, your own truths you're too afraid to tell, maybe my story will give you the courage to speak up before it's too late. Now, before I dive into the hardest story I've ever had to tell, I want to ask you for something. These stories, real stories from real women like me who've lived through impossible situations, they're free to watch, and they're here to help you feel less alone in whatever you're going through. But if this story resonates with you, if you want to hear more stories of women finding their strength when everything seemed lost, I'd be so grateful if you'd hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell. It takes just a second of your time, but it helps this channel reach other women who might need to hear these stories. And if you're willing, leave a like and drop a comment telling me what you think as we go through this journey together. Maybe even share what city or country you're watching from. Your support helps these real stories reach more people who need them. And honestly, knowing you're out there listening makes sharing the hardest parts of my life a little easier. Thank you, from the bottom of my heart, for being here and for being part of this community of strong women. I was born in 1952 in a small town called Brevard, about 30 miles southwest of Asheville, North Carolina. If you've never been to that part of the Appalachians, it's beautiful country, mountains covered in thick forests, waterfalls everywhere you look, and a quiet that settles into your bones. But it's also the kind of place where everyone knows everyone else's business. And in 1973, that meant there were certain rules you followed if you wanted to keep your reputation intact. My daddy, Robert Earl Thompson, worked at the paper mill in nearby Canton. The smell of sulfur from that mill would drift through the valleys on humid days, and locals used to joke that it was the smell of money. Daddy would come home every evening with his clothes stained and his hands rough as tree bark, but he was proud of his work. It was honest labor, and it put food on our table. Mama, whose name was Virginia Louise, worked as a seamstress out of our home. Women from all over the county would bring her fabric and patterns, and she'd create beautiful dresses for church, for weddings, for special occasions. I learned to sew at her elbow, threading needles before my fingers were steady enough to do it without poking myself a dozen times. She had a Singer machine that she'd inherited from her own mother, and the sound of that machine humming was the soundtrack of my childhood. We lived in a white clapboard house on Maple Street, 3 bedrooms and 1 bathroom, with a front porch where we'd shell peas in the summer and a backyard where Mama grew tomatoes and green beans. We weren't wealthy, not by any stretch, but we weren't poor either. We were solidly working class, which in Brevard in the 1950s and 60s meant you had enough to eat, clothes without holes, and the expectation that you'd go to church every Sunday morning without fail. I had 2 younger brothers, Michael and David, who spent most of their childhood covered in dirt and bruises from playing in the woods behind our house. As the only girl and the oldest child, I was expected to be the responsible one, the good example. I learned early that there were different rules for boys and girls in our town. My brothers could stay out until the streetlights came on. I had to be home before dinner. My brothers could talk back to our parents, and it was called spirit. If I did the same thing, it was called disrespect. But I didn't mind too much. I was a good student at Brevet High School, made decent grades, sang in the church choir at First Baptist, and had a small group of friends who I'd known since elementary school. I had dreams of maybe going to secretarial school in Asheville after graduation, of getting a job in an office somewhere, of wearing nice clothes and working in a building with air conditioning instead of standing over a sewing machine in a hot room like Mama did. Then I met Thomas Michael Patterson in the summer of 1972, and all those careful plans dissolved like sugar in hot tea. Thomas wasn't from Brevard. He was from Charlotte, visiting his aunt, who lived 2 streets over from us, and he was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. He had dark hair that was just a little too long to be respectable, green eyes that sparkled when he smiled, and a way of talking that made even the most ordinary things sound interesting. He was 23, working construction, and he rode a motorcycle, a Harley Davidson that was loud enough to wake the dead and made my mama clutch her pearls every time he pulled up to our house. I was 19, had just graduated high school the year before, and was working part-time at the public library while living at home. I'd never had a serious boyfriend. The boys in Brevard had all felt like my brothers. I'd known them too long to see them as anything romantic. But Thomas was different. Thomas was exciting and new and dangerous in a way that both terrified and thrilled me. We started seeing each other that summer, and I fell hard and fast. He'd take me riding on his motorcycle up into the mountains, to places where you could see for miles, where the air was so clean it hurt to breathe. He'd bring me wildflowers and tell me I was pretty, and I believed him because I wanted to believe him. When he said he loved me, standing by Looking Glass Falls with the water crashing behind us and the mist creating tiny rainbows in the air, I said it back without hesitation. My parents didn't approve. Daddy called him that Charlotte boy, with a sneer in his voice, and Mama would purse her lips every time his name came up in conversation. But they didn't forbid me from seeing him, probably because they thought it was a summer romance that would fizzle out when the weather turned cold and Thomas went back to Charlotte. They were wrong. By September of 1972, Thomas and I were talking about the future. He wanted to save up some money and maybe open his own mechanic shop. I was still working at the library, saving every penny I could from my paychecks. We talked about getting married eventually, though there was no ring, no formal proposal, just dreams spoken softly in the dark, plans that felt real and possible. Then came November 1972, and my life changed forever. I realized I was pregnant when I missed my second period. I was sitting in the employee bathroom at the library, staring at the calendar I kept in my purse, counting the days over and over, hoping I'd made a mistake. But the math was clear. I was late. Very late. The fear that gripped me that day is hard to describe to anyone who didn't live through that era. Today, an unmarried woman getting pregnant is still complicated, but it's not the social death sentence it was in 1972 in a small town in North Carolina. Back then, it meant shame. For you, for your family, for your entire extended family. It meant whispers at church, pitying looks at the grocery store, and the very real possibility that you'd be shunned by the community that had known you your whole life. I didn't tell anyone for weeks. Not Thomas, not my parents, not even my best friend Carolyn, who I usually told everything. I just kept going through the motions, going to work at the library, eating dinner with my family, lying in bed at night with my hand on my still flat stomach, wondering what I was going to do. When I finally told Thomas in early December, we were parked at our usual spot overlooking the valley, and I could see my breath in the cold air. His reaction wasn't what I'd hoped for, but it wasn't the worst it could have been either. He didn't run. He didn't deny it was his. He just sat there with his hands gripping the steering wheel of his truck, staring straight ahead. "We'll get married," he finally said, "right away, before you start showing. That way people will think the baby came early." It wasn't the most romantic proposal, but I said yes anyway. What choice did I have? I loved him, and he was willing to marry me. In 1972, in Brevard, North Carolina, that was the best outcome a girl in my situation could hope for. We told my parents a week later. I'll never forget that conversation. We were in the living room, the Christmas tree twinkling in the corner, the smell of Mama's sugar cookies drifting from the kitchen. I was so nervous I thought I might vomit right there on Mama's clean carpet. "Daddy? Mama?" I started, my voice shaking. "Thomas and I have something to tell you. We're getting married." Mama's face lit up for just a second before she caught the tone of my voice and looked closer at my face. I watched her expression change from joy to confusion to horrified understanding in the space of a heartbeat. "How far along are you?" she asked quietly. I couldn't lie to her. 2 months. The silence that followed felt like it lasted for hours. Daddy's face turned red, then purple. He stood up from his chair so fast it rocked backward. "Get out," he said to Thomas. "Get out of my house." "Sir, Thomas started. "I said get out." Thomas left. I stayed. And for the next hour, my parents and I had the worst conversation of my life up to that point. Daddy called me every name he could think of without actually cursing. Mama cried so hard she made herself sick. My brothers hovered in the hallway, pretending they couldn't hear every word. But by the end of that awful night, we had a plan. Thomas and I would get married quickly, quietly, at the courthouse in Asheville. There would be no church wedding, no white dress, no reception with cake and dancing. Just a judge, 2 witnesses, and the legal document that would make Thomas my husband and legitimize the baby I was carrying. Except that's not what happened. In January 1973, I went to Dr. Harrison's office in Asheville for my first official prenatal appointment. Thomas came with me, his hand sweating in mine as we sat in the waiting room with its yellowed wallpaper and its magazines from 1971. We'd been married for 3 weeks by then, a rushed courthouse ceremony with my parents as witnesses, everyone grim-faced and silent. I was wearing a plain blue dress Mama had made, and Thomas wore his only suit. Afterward, we'd gone to a diner and had grilled cheese sandwiches, and nobody said much of anything. We'd moved into a tiny apartment on the edge of town, 2 rooms and a kitchenette, the kind of place where you could hear your neighbors' conversations through the thin walls and the bathroom fixtures rattled whenever someone upstairs took a shower. But it was ours, and I was determined to make it a home. Dr. Harrison was in his 60s, with white hair and gentle hands. He'd delivered half the babies in Transylvania County, including me and my brothers. When he pressed the cold stethoscope against my belly and moved it around, his expression changed. "Well now," he said softly. "That's interesting." "What?" I asked, fear spiking in my chest. "Is something wrong with the baby?" "Not wrong exactly." He moved the stethoscope again, listened, moved it once more. "But I'm hearing 2 distinct heartbeats, Dorothy May." The world seemed to tilt sideways. 2? "Twins," he confirmed, looking up at me with those kind eyes. "You're carrying twins." I looked at Thomas. He'd gone pale as fresh snow. I felt my own face doing the same thing. One baby was already going to be a struggle on his construction worker's salary and my library pay. 2 babies? 2 of everything. Diapers, bottles, cribs, clothes. How would we manage? Dr. Harrison must have seen the panic on our faces. "Now, don't you worry," he said in that soothing voice he probably used 100 times a week. "Lots of women have twins and do just fine. You're young and healthy. The pregnancy looks good so far. You'll just need to be extra careful. Eat plenty, get rest when you can." I nodded numbly, not really processing his words. All I could think was, 2 babies, 2 babies, 2 babies. The drive back to Brevard was silent. Thomas gripped the steering wheel so tight his knuckles were white. I stared out the window at the mountains, their peaks still covered in January snow, and tried to imagine my future. At 20 years old, I was going to be the mother of twins. When I told my parents that evening, Mama actually laughed. Not a happy laugh, but the kind of laugh that comes when things are so absurd you don't know how else to react. "Twins," she said, shaking her head. "Of course it's twins, because one shotgun wedding baby wasn't enough trouble." Daddy didn't say anything. He just walked out of the room. The pregnancy was hard. I was sick constantly for the first 4 months. Could barely keep food down, lost weight instead of gaining it. By the time I hit 5 months, I was enormous. My back ached constantly. I couldn't sleep because no matter how I positioned myself, I was uncomfortable. And the fear, the constant gnawing fear about how we were going to manage, never left me. Thomas picked up extra shifts when he could, came home exhausted and covered in sawdust and concrete dust, fell into bed without saying much. The motorcycle got sold to help pay for baby supplies. The dreams of opening a mechanic shop faded away, replaced by the reality of diapers and formula and medical bills. In April, when I was about 6 months along, Mama came over to the apartment. She found me sitting on the couch, crying because I'd tried to tie my shoes and couldn't reach my feet anymore. She sat down next to me, took my swollen feet into her lap, and said the words that would change everything. "Dorothy May, your daddy and I have been talking," she said, not looking at me, focusing on untying my laces. "And we think you need to consider what's best for these babies." "What do you mean?" I asked, wiping my face with the back of my hand. "You and Thomas can barely afford to take care of yourselves, let alone 2 babies. You're living in this tiny apartment. Thomas is working himself to death, and you can see it's still not enough." She finally looked up at me, and her eyes were sad but firm. "There are couples out there, good Christian couples, who can't have children of their own, who would give anything for a baby, who could provide everything you can't." It took me a moment to understand what she was suggesting. When I did, I felt like she'd slapped me. "You want me to give away my babies?" "Not babies, plural," she said quietly. "1 baby. Keep 1, give 1 to a family that can provide for it properly. Think about it, Dorothy. Twins could have everything. 2 sets of parents who love them, 2 good homes, 2 chances at a better life than what you can give them." "No." I pulled my feet back from her lap. "No, absolutely not." "Just think about it," she insisted. "You have 3 months before they're born. Just think about what's best for them, not what's best for you." She left after that, and I spent the rest of the afternoon crying so hard I made myself sick. When Thomas came home, I told him what Mama had said. I expected him to be outraged, to tell me to tell her to mind her own business. Instead, he sat down heavily on the couch and put his head in his hands. "Maybe she's right," he said quietly. Those 3 words shattered something inside me. "What?" "Dorothy, look around. Look at this place. Look at our bank account. I'm working 60 hours a week, and we're barely making rent and utilities. How are we going to afford 2 babies? Formula, diapers, doctor visits, clothes. They grow so fast you have to buy new clothes every few months. And that's not even thinking about later. about school supplies and shoes and everything else. "We'll figure it out," I said desperately. "Lots of people have twins." Dr. Harrison said. "Dr. Harrison doesn't have to pay our bills," Thomas interrupted. He looked at me, and his face was older than it had been that summer when we'd fallen in love. "I'm not saying I want to give away one of our kids. I'm just saying maybe your mama has a point. Maybe one baby having a good life is better than two babies struggling." I wanted to argue more, but the exhaustion won. I went to bed that night with my hand on my huge belly, feeling the babies moving inside me, and I whispered, "I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry," over and over until I fell asleep. Over the next weeks, the pressure mounted. Mama brought it up every time she visited. Thomas's silence on the subject spoke louder than words. Even Dr. Harrison, in his gentle way, mentioned that there were agencies that specialized in private adoptions, that there were many couples desperate for babies, that I should consider all my options. The thing was, I knew they were right about the money. We were drowning financially, and the babies weren't even born yet. I'd had to quit my job at the library in my 5th month because I was too tired and sick to work. We were living on Thomas's income alone, and it wasn't enough. We'd already borrowed money from Thomas's parents to pay the rent one month. The electric company had sent us a shut-off notice. We were eating beans and rice for dinner most nights because that was all we could afford. But every time I thought about giving away one of my babies, something in me rebelled. These were my children, both of them. How could I choose to keep one and give away the other? It felt like something out of a horrible fairy tale, like King Solomon threatening to cut the baby in half. In June, when I was almost 8 months pregnant and the North Carolina heat was oppressive, Mama came to the apartment with a woman named Mrs. Eleanor Pritchard. Mrs. Pritchard was a social worker who specialized in private adoptions. She was in her 50s, wore a navy blue suit despite the heat, and carried a briefcase that she set on our coffee table with a decisive thud. "Dorothy," Mama said, "Mrs. Pritchard would like to talk to you about your options. I wanted to tell them both to leave, but I was too tired, too hot, too overwhelmed." So I sat there in my maternity dress with the sweat running down my back and listened as Mrs. Pritchard explained the process. "We have a lovely couple," she said, pulling papers from her briefcase. "The husband is a doctor. The wife was a teacher before they married. They've been trying to have children for 8 years. They live in a beautiful home in Winston-Salem. They're active in their church. They're financially stable. They would be able to give a child every advantage." She pushed a photograph across the table. A smiling couple in their 30s, standing in front of a large brick house with white columns. They looked kind. They looked wealthy. They looked like the kind of people who could give a child everything Thomas and I couldn't. "The adoption would be closed," Mrs. Pritchard continued. "You wouldn't have any contact with the child after placement. The adoptive parents would be listed on the birth certificate. Legally, the child would be entirely theirs, but you would know that your baby was loved and cared for and had every opportunity in life." Thomas came home in the middle of this conversation, stopped in the doorway, looked at the scene in front of him, me crying, Mama looking determined, Mrs. Pritchard with her briefcase and her papers, and he didn't ask any questions. He just walked to the bedroom and closed the door behind him. "Think about it," Mrs. Pritchard said as she packed up her things. "You have about 4 weeks before your due date. If you decide to go forward with the adoption, call me at this number." She left a business card on the table. "And Dorothy, I know this seems impossibly hard right now, but sometimes the hardest choice is the most loving one." After she left, Mama stayed behind. She sat next to me on the couch and took my hand. "I know you think I'm a terrible person for pushing this," she said. "But Dorothy May, I'm your mother. I've known you for 20 years. I've watched you struggle these past months. I've seen how hard this is for you and Thomas, and I love you enough to say the hard thing, the thing you don't want to hear. You can't take care of 2 babies. Not properly, not the way they deserve, but you could take care of one. You could give one baby a good life with you, and give the other baby a good life with people who have the resources to provide everything." "How am I supposed to choose?" I whispered. How am I supposed to look at two newborn babies and decide which one stays and which one goes? You don't choose based on the babies, Mama said. You let the doctors take them when they're born, before you see them clearly, before you can tell them apart. You keep the first one born and place the second one. That way there's no choice to make. It's just the way it is. The fact that she'd thought it through that far, that she'd already planned how to make it less painful, somehow made it worse. I didn't agree that day. I didn't call Mrs. Pritchard, but I also didn't throw away her business card. I kept it in the drawer of my bedside table, and sometimes in the middle of the night when I couldn't sleep because the babies were moving and my back was killing me, and I could hear Thomas in the living room going over bills, I would take out that card and stare at it. The twins were born on July 23, 1973, at Mission Hospital in Asheville. My labor started at 3 in the morning, and by the time we got to the hospital, the contractions were coming fast and hard. Thomas held my hand while I screamed, and I remember thinking, this is it. This is really happening. In a few hours, everything will be different. Baby A was born at 2:47 p.m. A girl, 6 pounds 2 ounces, with a thick head of dark hair and lungs that could wake the dead. They cleaned her up and put her on my chest, and I looked down at her tiny red, perfect face and fell completely in love. Baby B was born 12 minutes later, at 2:59 p.m. Another girl, 6 pounds even, also with dark hair, also screaming. They put her on my chest too, and I looked at both of my daughters, one on each side, and I thought there is no way, absolutely no way, that I can give either of you away. But then Dr. Harrison was sewing up my episiotomy, and the nurses were taking the babies to clean them up properly and weigh them and do all the standard tests. And I looked at Thomas. He was staring at the babies with this expression of wonder mixed with terror, and I knew he was thinking the same thing I was. How are we going to do this? The nurses brought the babies back, each wrapped in a pink blanket, and they put them in the bassinet next to my bed. They looked identical to me. Same dark hair, same tiny noses, same rosebud mouths. I couldn't tell them apart. We need names for the birth certificates, the nurse said cheerfully, apparently oblivious to the tension in the room. Thomas and I had discussed names back when we thought there was only one baby. We'd picked Rebecca for a girl, after Thomas's grandmother, but we'd never talked about what to name twins. The first one is Rebecca, I said, my voice hoarse from screaming. Rebecca Lynn Patterson, the nurse wrote that down. And the second? I looked at Thomas. He looked at me. Neither of us said anything. You don't have to decide right now, the nurse said kindly. You have a few days to think about it. For now, we'll just call this one Baby Girl Patterson B. After the nurse left, Mama came into the room. She'd been in the waiting room during the delivery. She walked to the bassinet and looked down at the babies. They're beautiful, she said. Then she looked at me. Did you make a decision? I can't, I sobbed. Mama, I can't do it. I can't give one of them away. She pulled a chair over to my bedside and sat down. Dorothy May, look at me. She waited until I met her eyes. You have two choices here. You can keep both babies and watch them grow up in poverty, always struggling, always going without things they need. Or you can keep one and give one a life of comfort and opportunity. It's not a question of loving them. It's a question of doing what's best for them. Thomas, who'd been silent this whole time, finally spoke. I called Mrs. Pritchard this morning while you were in labor. She said the couple in Winston-Salem is standing by. They can come tomorrow. They have everything ready. A nursery, clothes, everything. I felt like I was drowning. Like I was being pulled under by a current I couldn't fight. Thomas, we can't do this, he said, and his voice cracked. Dorothy, I love you. I love those babies. But we can't do this. We're 21 and 23 years old. We're broke. We're living in a place that barely has heat. What kind of life is that for two babies? I wanted to argue, but I was so tired. I'd been in labor for 12 hours. My body hurt everywhere. And when I looked at those two tiny faces in the bassinet, so perfect and innocent and unaware that their lives were about to be decided by people who had no idea what they were doing, I felt something inside me break. "Okay," I whispered. "Okay." Mama's hand tightened on mine. "You're doing the right thing." But it didn't feel right. It felt like dying. Mrs. Pritchard came the next day with papers for me to sign. I didn't read them. I just signed where she pointed, my hand shaking so badly I could barely write my name. The couple from Winston-Salem would be there that evening to pick up baby girl B. They would name her. They would raise her. She would legally be theirs. "Do you want to feed her one more time before they come?" the nurse asked me gently. I did. I held baby girl B and fed her and memorized every inch of her face. I looked for something that would distinguish her from Rebecca, some birthmark or feature that was uniquely hers, but they were identical, perfect, identical little girls. When the couple arrived, Mr. and Mrs. Charles and Eleanor Whitmire, their names were, though I never met them, Mrs. Pritchard just told me. I asked the nurse to take Rebecca to the nursery. I couldn't bear for her to be in the room when they took her sister. I didn't watch them leave with her. I turned my face to the wall and closed my eyes and listened to the sound of a baby crying as they carried her away. And I didn't know if it was baby girl B or Rebecca or both of them. But the sound of it broke something in me that never fully healed. When the nurse brought Rebecca back, she was quiet, almost eerily so. I held her, and I whispered, "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. You had a sister and I gave her away, and you're never going to know her, and I'm so, so sorry." We left the hospital 2 days later. I went home with one baby. I'd given birth to two. The nurse handed me Rebecca's birth certificate before we left. It listed her birth date, her birth time, 2:47 p.m., her weight and length. It listed Thomas and me as her parents. It made no mention of a twin. It was as if baby girl B had never existed. Except I knew she had, and I knew I would carry that knowledge for the rest of my life. The first year of Rebecca's life was both harder and easier than I'd expected. Harder because even one baby was exhausting and expensive and overwhelming. Easier because at least it was possible, which it wouldn't have been with two. But every single day I thought about the baby I'd given away. Every time I changed Rebecca's diaper, I wondered if someone was changing her sister's diaper at the same moment. Every time Rebecca smiled for the first time, took her first step, said her first word, I wondered if her sister was doing the same things. Were they identical in personality as well as appearance? Did they have the same laugh, the same cry, the same way of reaching for things? I never told anyone about these thoughts. Thomas and I didn't talk about baby girl B. It was like we'd made a silent agreement to pretend it never happened, that Rebecca was our only child, that there had never been twins. When people asked if we planned to have more children, I said maybe someday, and left it at that. My parents never brought it up again either. Mama acted like Rebecca was her first and only grandchild. She made her clothes, knitted her blankets, babysit when I went back to work part-time at the library. It was like those hours in the hospital had been erased from everyone's memory except mine. But I remembered. Oh God, I remembered. When Rebecca was 6 months old, I called Mrs. Pritchard. I don't know what I was hoping for, maybe just confirmation that baby girl B was okay, that the couple in Winston-Salem was taking good care of her, that she was healthy and happy. "Mrs. Patterson," Mrs. Pritchard said, her voice sympathetic but firm. "The adoption was closed for a reason. I can't give you any information about the child or the adoptive family. That was part of the agreement you signed. I just want to know if she's okay," I said, my voice breaking. "I just want to know if she's healthy." "I'm sure she's fine," Mrs. Pritchard said. "The Whitmires are wonderful people. They'll provide an excellent home. But Dorothy, you need to move forward with your life. You made a decision, a difficult decision, but it's done now. You need to focus on the daughter you kept." I hung up, feeling worse than before I'd called. The years passed. Rebecca grew. She was a bright, energetic child, Always laughing, always moving. She had Thomas's green eyes and my dark hair and the kind of personality that filled up a room. I loved her fiercely, desperately, the way I imagine mothers have loved their children since the beginning of time. But there was always a shadow over my love, a guilt that colored everything. How could I fully enjoy Rebecca's childhood when I knew her twin was out there somewhere, growing up with different parents, not knowing she had a sister, not knowing about us? Sometimes Rebecca would say things that broke my heart in ways she couldn't understand. When she was 4, she announced that she had an imaginary friend named Becky. "Becky looks just like me," she said. "She's my twin. We do everything together." I had to leave the room so she wouldn't see me cry. When she was 7, she asked, "Mama, why don't I have any brothers or sisters? All my friends have siblings." "Some families are small, sweetie," I said. "Quality over quantity." "But don't you and Daddy want more kids?" "We're happy with you," Thomas said firmly. "You're all we need." It wasn't a lie exactly. But it wasn't the full truth either. Rebecca grew up as an only child, and she developed the characteristics you'd expect. She was independent, comfortable around adults, sometimes lonely. She would beg for sleepovers with friends, would cry when cousins went home after holidays, would watch families with multiple children at the park with this expression of longing that made my guilt expand until I thought it would suffocate me. On the twins' 10th birthday, though Rebecca thought it was just her birthday, I bought 2 cupcakes and put 10 candles on each. I gave one to Rebecca and told her to make a wish. After she went to bed, I lit the candles on the second cupcake and whispered, "Happy birthday, wherever you are," before blowing them out. I did this every year. It became my private ritual, my way of acknowledging the daughter I'd given away even though no one else knew she existed. Thomas and I never talked about it. Our marriage was stable but not happy. We loved each other in that comfortable, worn-in way that happens when you've been together for years. But the spark we'd had on that motorcycle in the summer of 1972 was long gone. We were partners in raising Rebecca and paying bills and maintaining the house we'd managed to buy when Rebecca was 5. We slept in the same bed but rarely touched. We talked about Rebecca's school and the grocery list and whether we needed to call a plumber, but we never talked about anything that mattered. Sometimes I wondered if he thought about baby girl B as much as I did. If he ever drove through Winston-Salem and wondered if one of the children he saw on the street was his daughter. If he ever regretted the decision we'd made. But I never asked, and he never said. The warning signs that I should have told Rebecca about her twin started early, but I rationalized every single one of them. The first happened when Rebecca was 12. We were filling out paperwork for her to go to a summer camp, and one of the questions was about family medical history. "Any twins in the family?" it asked. "Twins?" Rebecca read over my shoulder. "Are there twins in our family?" I should have told her then. I should have said, "Yes, you're a twin, you have a sister out there somewhere." But instead I said, "Your daddy's grandmother was a twin," which was true, and left it at that. The second happened when she was 15. She was doing a biology unit on genetics at school, and she came home excited about dominant and recessive genes and Punnett squares. "Mrs. Cooper says twins usually run in families," she said at dinner. "She says if you have twins in your family, you're more likely to have twins yourself." "That's interesting," I said, my heart pounding. I could feel Thomas's eyes on me from across the table, but I didn't look at him. "So do we have twins in our family?" Rebecca pressed. "Besides Grandma Thomas?" "Not that I know of," I lied. And then I changed the subject by asking her about her English essay, and she got distracted, and the moment passed. The third happened when she was 17. She was applying to colleges and needed her birth certificate for one of the applications. I gave her the copy I kept in our filing cabinet, and she studied it while sitting at the kitchen table. "Mama, what time was I born?" she asked. 2:47 in the afternoon, I said automatically. I'd never forgotten that exact time. How could I, when 12 minutes later my other daughter was born? Was it a long labor? 12 hours, I said, turning back to the stove where I was cooking dinner so she wouldn't see my face. Was I a big baby? 6 pounds 2 ounces, average size. Was it just me, or were there other babies being born at the same time? My hand froze on the spoon I was holding. Why do you ask that? She shrugged. I don't know. I was just thinking about birth order and wondered if there were other babies in the nursery when I was born. I'm sure there were, I said carefully. It was a busy hospital. She seemed satisfied with that answer and went back to her college applications. But these moments, these near misses, they accumulated over the years. Every time Rebecca mentioned wanting siblings, every time she asked about our family history, every time she looked at me with Thomas's green eyes and asked questions that came too close to the truth, I felt the weight of my lie growing heavier. The fourth significant warning happened when she was 19, home from college for Christmas break. She'd taken a psychology class that semester and was fascinated by nature versus nurture debates. Professor Martinez says that studies of twins raised apart show that genetics influences personality way more than environment, she said one evening while we were decorating the Christmas tree. Like, there have been cases where identical twins who were separated at birth and raised in completely different families ended up having incredibly similar lives, same jobs, same hobbies. Sometimes they even married people with the same names. I fumbled the ornament I was holding, and it dropped to the floor, shattering. Oh, how clumsy of me, I said, kneeling to pick up the pieces. Let me help, Rebecca said, getting down beside me. But yeah, isn't that fascinating? That genetics could be that powerful? Very fascinating, I managed to say. Makes you wonder about adopted kids, she continued, carefully picking up shards of glass. Like, if they feel incomplete somehow, not knowing their biological families, not knowing if they have siblings out there. I cut my finger on a piece of the broken ornament. The blood welled up bright red, and Rebecca gasped. Mom, you're bleeding. Hold on, I'll get a Band-Aid. Ooh. While she was in the bathroom, I sat there on the living room floor with my bleeding finger and my heart pounding and thought, this is it, this is the moment, tell her now. But when she came back with the Band-Aid and antiseptic, I just held out my finger and let her patch me up and said nothing. The fifth sign came when Rebecca was 23 and announced she was getting married. His name was Michael. He was a good man who worked as an accountant, and he made Rebecca happy. I should have been nothing but joyful, and I was joyful, but underneath that joy was terror. Because getting married meant filling out marriage licenses, which meant Rebecca would need her birth certificate, the real one, not just the copy she'd used for college applications. Mom, I need my birth certificate, she said one afternoon while we were addressing wedding invitations at my kitchen table. Thomas had died of a heart attack 2 years earlier, suddenly and without warning, so it was just Rebecca and me working on the invitations together. I'll get it for you, I said quickly. Too quickly. She looked at me strangely. I can get it myself. I know where the filing cabinet is. No, it's fine. I know exactly where it is. You keep working on the invitations. I went to the bedroom and pulled out the filing cabinet drawer with shaking hands. There it was, Rebecca's birth certificate, stating her birth date and time, listing Thomas and me as her parents, stating nothing about a twin. But I knew that wasn't the full story. Somewhere in some courthouse or hospital record room, there had to be documentation of both births. What if Rebecca requested her medical records from the hospital? What if she did one of those DNA tests that were becoming so popular and discovered she had a twin? I took the birth certificate to Rebecca, and she glanced at it briefly before putting it in her wedding planning folder. Thanks, Mom, she said, and went back to addressing envelopes. I'd dodged another bullet, but I was running out of chances. The lie was becoming harder to maintain, and the possibilities for Rebecca to discover the truth on her own were multiplying. The sixth sign was the most terrifying. Rebecca was 26, had been married to Michael for 3 years, and they were trying to get pregnant. She came over for coffee one Saturday morning, and she was carrying a thick file folder. "Mike and I went to a genetic counselor," she announced, settling into the chair across from me at my kitchen table. "Since we're trying to get pregnant, we wanted to know if there were any genetic issues in either of our families that we should be aware of." My coffee cup rattled against the saucer as I set it down. "Oh?" "Yeah, and the counselor asked all these questions about family history. Multiple births, genetic disorders, age of grandparents when they died, causes of death, all of it." She opened the folder. "I realized I don't really know much about your side of the family. Grandma and Grandpa Thompson are both dead now, obviously. And Uncle Michael and Uncle David don't talk much about family history." "What do you need to know?" I asked, my mouth dry. "Well, for one thing, are there any twins in your family? The counselor said twin tendency can be inherited." There it was again. That question that kept coming back to haunt me. "Your Grandma Thompson's mother was a twin," I said, which was true. "So yes, it runs in the family. But no one in your immediate family? You don't have any twin siblings, right?" "No," I said, also true, in the most literal sense. "Okay, and no history of genetic disorders that you know of?" We went through her list of questions, and I answered as honestly as I could while still maintaining the lie. Every question felt like a trap, like one wrong word would expose everything. After she left, I sat at my kitchen table for an hour, just staring at nothing. How much longer could I keep this up? Rebecca was 26 now, the same age I'd been when I'd given her twin away. How many more conversations like this could I survive before I broke down and told her the truth? The seventh sign happened a few months later. Rebecca called me, her voice strange. "Mom, you know those DNA testing kits? The ones where you send in your saliva and they tell you your ancestry?" My heart stopped. "Yes?" "Michael's sister gave us each one for Christmas. As a joke, kind of, because Mike's family is always arguing about whether they're more Irish or more Italian. We sent them in last month and just got the results back." I couldn't breathe. If Rebecca had done a DNA test, and if her twin had also done a DNA test, they would show up as matches. They would show up as siblings. The truth would be out, and I would have no control over how or when Rebecca learned it. "That's nice," I managed to say. "Yeah, it's interesting. Apparently I'm 32% Italian, 28% Irish, 18% German, and a bunch of other stuff in smaller percentages. No big surprises. But Mom, it also shows genetic relatives. Like, it can tell you if you have close genetic matches, siblings, cousins, stuff like that." This was it. She was about to tell me she'd discovered a twin. I gripped the phone so hard my hand ached. "And?" I whispered. "And it shows Michael as my match. Obviously, since we both took the test. And it shows a bunch of distant cousins I've never heard of. But no siblings or half-siblings or anything like that." She laughed. "I know that should be obvious since I'm an only child. But I guess part of me was hoping I'd discover I had some secret sibling out there. Wishful thinking from an only child, right?" "Right," I said weakly. "Wishful thinking." After I hung up, I realized what had happened. Rebecca had done a DNA test, but her twin apparently hadn't. Or if she had, she'd used a different company, and the results didn't cross-reference between companies. I'd gotten incredibly lucky. But the eighth and final sign was what finally pushed me to make the decision I'm making now. Last month, Rebecca called me with news. "Mom, I'm pregnant." I was overjoyed. Truly, purely joyful in a way I hadn't been in years. I was going to be a grandmother. Rebecca was going to be a mother. This was wonderful news. But then she said, "The doctor did an ultrasound yesterday, and Mom, it's twins." The world tilted sideways. I had to sit down. "Twins," I repeated numbly. "I know. Fraternal twins, they think. A boy and a girl. Can you believe it? Twins! And the doctor said since there are twins in the family, it makes sense genetically." She asked if I was a twin, or if you were a twin, and I said no, but I mentioned that there were twins further back in the family tree, so it must have skipped a generation and come to me. She kept talking, excited about baby names and nursery colors and how they'd need a bigger house, but I barely heard her. All I could think was, she's having twins. My daughter is having twins, and she still doesn't know that she is a twin herself. That night, I lay in bed, the same bed I'd shared with Thomas for 35 years before he died, and I made a decision. When the twins are born, when Rebecca is holding both of her babies, I'm going to tell her the truth. I'm going to tell her that she has a twin sister, that her sister is out there somewhere, that I've been lying to her for her entire life, because I can't watch her raise twins while she doesn't know she is one. I can't sit by while she experiences the bond between her children and not tell her that there's someone out there who shared her womb, who entered the world 12 minutes after her, who might have her same laugh and her same gestures and her same way of thinking. I can't take this lie to my grave. But then I went to the doctor for a routine checkup 3 weeks ago, and he ordered some tests because I'd been having chest pain, and the tests led to more tests, and suddenly, I was sitting in an oncologist's office being told I had stage 4 lung cancer and 6 months to a year to live. Rebecca's twins are due in 5 months. I might not live to see them born, which means I need to tell Rebecca the truth now, before I die, before it's too late. And that's what brings me to today, to this moment, to this decision. After my diagnosis, I spent 2 days just sitting in my house, looking at old photographs, trying to process that I was dying, 73 years old. It's not young, but it's not ancient either. I could have had another decade or more. I could have watched Rebecca's twins grow up. But I don't get that choice. What I do get to choose is whether I die with this secret still locked inside me, or whether I finally tell the truth. The decision about what to do didn't take long, but figuring out how to do it took longer. I couldn't just call Rebecca and say, "By the way, you have a twin sister I gave away when you were born." That was too much, too sudden. She'd need evidence, proof that I wasn't losing my mind or making it up for attention in my final months. So I started gathering evidence. First, I drove to Mission Hospital in Asheville to the records department. The woman at the desk was young enough to be my granddaughter, with pink highlights in her hair and earbuds around her neck. "I need birth records from July 23, 1973, I told her. "Are you the patient or a family member?" she asked, pulling up a form on her computer. "I'm the mother. I gave birth that day." She asked for my ID and my daughter's name and date of birth. She typed for a few minutes, then frowned at her computer screen. "I'm seeing a record for Rebecca Lynn Patterson, born at 2:47 p.m., she said. "Is that correct?" "Yes, but there was another baby, a twin, born 12 minutes later." The woman typed some more, clicked around, frowned deeper. "I'm not seeing any record of a second birth. Are you sure it was at this hospital?" "I'm positive. I was there. I gave birth to both of them right here." "Let me check the archive system," she said, and disappeared into a back room. She was gone for 15 minutes. When she came back, she was carrying a thin file folder. "Okay, this is strange," she said. "There's a notation in the archived physical records about twin births, but the second birth certificate was processed through a private adoption agency and sealed. I can't access any of the details. All I can confirm is that yes, there was a second infant born that day, but all identifying information is restricted." "Can I get a copy of that notation?" I asked. "I can give you a letter confirming that there was a twin birth, but I can't include any information about the second child or the adoption." She typed up a brief letter on hospital letterhead, printed it, stamped it with an official seal, and handed it to me. "Will this help?" "It's a start," I said. My next stop was the courthouse in Asheville to the records office. This time, I was looking for my original birth records, the ones that would have been filed before the adoption was finalized. But I ran into the same wall: closed adoption, sealed records, no access without a court order. The clerk, an older woman with gray hair and glasses, looked at me sympathetically. "Honey, I know this must be frustrating, but those records are sealed for a reason. The adoptive family has a right to privacy. So does the child, who's now an adult." "The child is my daughter," I said. "I'm the biological mother. I have a right to know what happened to her." "Not according to the law," the clerk said gently. "Not in a closed adoption. I'm sorry." I tried Mrs. Pritchard's agency next, but when I called, I was told Mrs. Pritchard had retired 15 years ago and the agency had gone out of business. The records had been transferred to the state and accessing them required, surprise, surprise, a court order. I felt like I was hitting brick walls everywhere I turned. How was I supposed to find a daughter I'd given away 52 years ago when every record was sealed, every door was closed? Every person I talked to told me I had no rights, no claim, no access. I spent a week feeling hopeless. Maybe I was supposed to take this secret to my grave. Maybe the universe was telling me it was too late, that some mistakes can't be undone, that some truths are meant to stay buried. But then I thought about Rebecca. I thought about her standing in a nursery someday, holding her newborn twins, marveling at how different or similar they were, wondering if twins really did have special bonds like people said. And I couldn't stand the thought of her going through that experience without knowing her own truth. So I tried a different approach. I joined one of those adoption registry websites where biological parents and adoptees can register their information in hopes of finding each other. I created a profile with everything I knew. Birth date, July 23, 1973. Birth time 2:59 p.m. Birth location, Mission Hospital, Asheville, North Carolina. Birth mother Dorothy Mae Thompson Patterson. Adoptive parents, Charles and Eleanor Whitmire of Winston-Salem, North Carolina. I uploaded that profile and checked the website every single day, hoping against hope that somehow, somewhere, my other daughter was looking for me too. No matches. I tried Facebook, searching for women born on July 23, 1973, who lived in or around Winston-Salem. I found dozens of them. I looked through their photos, trying to see if any of them looked like Rebecca, looked like me, looked like Thomas. But how do you identify someone from their Facebook profile when you have no idea what they look like as an adult? The last time I saw her, she was a newborn. She could be anyone. I hired a private investigator, a man named Robert Chen, who advertised that he specialized in adoption searches. I paid him $1,500 up front, which was most of my savings, and gave him everything I knew. He called me a week later. "Mrs. Patterson, I found the adoption records. Well, not the full records, those are still sealed, but I found enough to confirm that Charles and Eleanor Whitmire did adopt a female infant in July 1973. However, they've both passed away. Charles died in 1995, Eleanor in 2003. My heart sank. The adoptive parents were dead, which meant there was no easy way to contact them and ask about their daughter. However, Mr. Chen continued, I did find that the Whitmires had no other children, which means their estate likely went to their adopted daughter. I can check property records and estate filings to try to track her down, but it'll take more time and more money. I gave him another $1,000. It was worth it. I had to know. 2 weeks later, he called back. I found her. My hand shook so badly I nearly dropped the phone. You found her? I found someone who matches the right age and connections to the Whitmire family. Her name is Sarah Catherine Garrett. She's 52 years old, married, lives in Charlotte, North Carolina, works as a nurse at Presbyterian Hospital. I can't be 100% certain it's your daughter without DNA confirmation, but the circumstantial evidence is strong. Charlotte, less than 3 hours from Asheville. She'd been that close this whole time. Can you give me her address? I asked. I can, but Mrs. Patterson, I strongly advise you to think carefully about how you approach this. If she doesn't know she was adopted, suddenly showing up could be traumatic, and even if she does know, she may not want contact. You need to prepare yourself for the possibility that she'll reject you. I understand, I said, but I'm dying, Mr. Chen. I have months left, not years. I can't afford to be cautious. He gave me her address and phone number. I wrote them down with trembling hands. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with my phone in my hand, staring at Sarah's number. Should I call her? Should I write her a letter? Should I just show up at her door? In the end, I decided to write. A letter seemed less intrusive than a phone call, less shocking than a surprise visit. It would give her time to process, time to decide how she wanted to respond. I went through 12 drafts before I got it right. Here's what I finally wrote. Dear Sarah, my name is Dorothy Mae Patterson. You don't know me, but I have reason to believe you might be my daughter. On July 23, 1973, I gave birth to twin girls at Mission Hospital in Asheville, North Carolina. I kept the first baby and named her Rebecca. I gave the second baby to Charles and Eleanor Whitmire of Winston-Salem through a private adoption agency. If you are the daughter they adopted, then you and Rebecca are identical twins. I know this must be shocking to read. I'm sorry to reach out to you this way, without warning, without any preparation, but I recently received a terminal cancer diagnosis, and I have very little time left. Before I die, I need to tell the truth about what happened 52 years ago. I need to apologize for giving you away, and I need to give you the chance to know your sister, if you want that. Rebecca doesn't know about you yet. I'm planning to tell her soon. She's currently pregnant with twins herself, and I think she deserves to know that she's a twin too. If you want to contact me, you can call me at phone number or write to me at address. If you don't want contact, I understand. I don't expect forgiveness. I just hope that someday you can understand that I made an impossible choice, and I've regretted it every day since. Sincerely, Dorothy Mae Patterson, your birth mother. I put the letter in an envelope, addressed it to Sarah Catherine Garrett, drove to the post office, and mailed it before I could change my mind. Then I went home and waited. 3 days after I mailed the letter to Sarah, Rebecca called me. Her voice was shaking when she asked, "Mom, can I come over? We need to talk." My heart dropped. Had she somehow found out? Had Sarah already contacted her? But how? I'd specifically said in my letter that Rebecca didn't know yet. "Of course, sweetie," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Is everything okay?" "I don't know," she said. "I'll be there in 20 minutes. Those 20 minutes felt like 20 hours. I paced around my living room, my mind racing through possibilities. What did she know? How did she find out? Was she angry? Hurt? Both? When she arrived, her face was pale. Her eyes red like she'd been crying. She had a manila envelope clutched in her hand. "What's wrong?" I asked, pulling her into the house. "Is it the babies? Is Michael okay?" "The babies are fine. Michael's fine." She walked to my couch and sat down heavily, like her legs couldn't hold her up anymore. "Mom, I did something without telling you. I'm sorry if you're going to be mad, but I had to know." "Know what?" She opened the manila envelope and pulled out several pieces of paper. "You know those DNA tests I did a while back? The ancestry ones?" Oh God, here it was. "Yes," I said quietly. "Well, they have this feature where you can opt in to see genetic relatives, more detailed than what I'd looked at before. And last week, I was bored and scrolling through my matches, looking at third cousins and distant relatives I've never heard of." She looked up at me, and her eyes were full of tears. "And I found a match for a half-sibling." My legs gave out. I sat down hard in the chair across from her. "Not a full sibling," she continued. "A half-sibling, same mother, different father, which means—" her voice broke. "Which means either you or Dad had another child that you never told me about." This was it, the moment I'd been dreading and planning for. But it wasn't happening the way I'd planned. She'd found out on her own, partially, and she had it wrong. "Rebecca," I said, my voice rough, "it's not a half-sibling." She frowned. "But the DNA test clearly says, the DNA test is wrong about the father. It's a full sibling. You have a twin sister." The silence that followed was so complete I could hear the refrigerator humming in the kitchen. "What?" Rebecca finally whispered. So I told her. Everything. From the moment I discovered I was pregnant with twins, to the financial pressure, to Mama's suggestions, to Mrs. Pritchard and the Whitmires, to that awful day in the hospital when I signed the papers and let them take her sister away. I told her about the years of guilt, the decades of lies, the careful omissions every time she asked about siblings. By the time I finished, we were both crying. Rebecca was hunched over on the couch, her arms wrapped around her pregnant belly, shaking with sobs. "How could you?" she finally said. "How could you give away my sister and never tell me?" "I was 21 years old," I said. "I was broke and scared, and everyone was telling me it was the right thing to do. I don't care how old you were." She stood up, her face red and wet with tears. "You gave away my twin sister and let me grow up alone. Do you know how many times I wished for a sibling? Do you know how lonely I was? And the whole time, I had a sister out there, and you kept it from me." I know, and I'm so sorry. Sorry doesn't fix this." She was pacing now, her hands pressed to her head. "My whole life is a lie. Everything you told me about my birth, about our family, all of it was a lie." "Not everything," I said weakly. "The important things were true. I loved you. I love you. Your father loved you." "Did Dad know?" she interrupted. "Did he know you gave away my sister?" "Yes, he knew. We made the decision together." "So both of my parents lied to me for my entire life." She laughed, but it was a horrible sound, devoid of humor. "That's just great. That's wonderful. Rebecca, please. I need to go." She grabbed her purse and the manila envelope. "I can't be here right now. I can't look at you right now. Wait, there's more." I pulled out the letter I'd written to Sarah, the copy I'd kept. "I found her, your sister. Her name is Sarah. She lives in Charlotte. I wrote to her 3 days ago, but I haven't heard back yet." Rebecca took the paper from me, read it quickly. "You found her and you didn't tell me?" "I was going to tell you. I was waiting for the right time." "There is no right time for this." She crumpled the paper in her fist. "You should have told me the day I was born, or the day I turned 5, or 10, or 20. You've had 52 years to tell me, and you waited until I found out on my own." "I'm dying," I said desperately. "I have cancer. Stage 4. I was going to tell you before I died. I swear." That stopped her. She turned to look at me, really look at me, and I could see the moment her anger shifted to something more complicated. "You're dying?" I nodded. 6 months to a year, they said. That's why I hired the private investigator. That's why I reached out to Sarah. I couldn't take this secret to my grave. Rebecca's face crumpled. She put both hands over her mouth and made a sound that was half sob, half gasp. "Oh my God, Mom! Oh my God!" She came back to the couch and sat down, but she didn't come near me. We sat on opposite ends of the living room, 2 women who'd lived together, loved each other, shared everything for 52 years, and suddenly there was a chasm between us that I didn't know how to cross. "I don't know what to do with this," Rebecca finally said. "I don't know how to process this. I have a twin sister I never knew about. My parents lied to me my entire life. My mom is dying. It's too much. It's all too much." "I know," I said, "and I'm so sorry for all of it." She looked at me with Thomas's green eyes, the same eyes Sarah probably had too, and said, "I need time. I need to think about this. I need to talk to Michael. I need—" She trailed off, shaking her head. "I need to not be here right now." She left, and I sat alone in my living room, listening to the sound of her car driving away, wondering if I'd just destroyed the only relationship I had left in the world. The next morning, my phone rang. Unknown number. "Hello?" I answered, my voice hoarse from crying all night. "Is this Dorothy Patterson?" A woman's voice, unfamiliar. "Yes." "This is Sarah Garrett. I got your letter." My heart stopped, restarted, raced. Sarah, oh my God, Sarah. I need to know if what you wrote is true, she said. Her voice was controlled, but I could hear the emotion underneath. My parents, my adoptive parents, they told me I was adopted when I was 8 years old. But they said my birth mother was young and unmarried and couldn't keep me. They never said anything about a twin. It's true, I said. Every word. You were born at 2:59 p.m., 12 minutes after your sister. You weighed 6 pounds even. You had dark hair. You looked identical to Rebecca. Silence. Then, what's her name? My sister's name? Rebecca. Rebecca Lynn. She's married now. Her last name is Morrison. She lives here in Asheville. She's pregnant with twins, fraternal, a boy and a girl. I heard a sound that might have been a laugh or a sob. Twins run in the family, then. Yes, they do. Another silence. Then, I want to meet her. I want to meet my sister. She wants to meet you too, I said, hoping it was true, hoping Rebecca hadn't spent the night deciding she never wanted anything to do with any of this. But Sarah, I need to tell you. She just found out about you yesterday. She's still processing. She's angry at me. This is all very fresh and raw. I've had 2 days since I got your letter, Sarah said. I haven't slept. I haven't been able to eat. I keep looking at myself in the mirror, trying to see her face. What does she look like? Do we look alike? I haven't seen you since you were a baby, I said. But if you look anything like you did then, yes, you looked identical. I need to see a picture. Do you have a picture of her? I do. I can send you one. Can you give me your email? She did. After we hung up, I went through my photos, physical photos because I was 73 and never quite got the hang of smartphones, and found one of Rebecca from her wedding 5 years ago. She was smiling, wearing her white dress, her dark hair pulled up, Thomas's green eyes sparkling with joy. I took a photo of the photo with my phone and sent it to Sarah with shaking hands. 5 minutes later, my phone rang again. Oh my God, Sarah said, her voice breaking. It's like looking at myself. I have that same smile, those same eyes. Even the way she holds her head, I do that. My husband always comments on it, how I tilt my head when I'm happy. You're identical, I said, crying now. You're identical twins. I need to meet her, Sarah said again. Soon as possible. Can you set something up? I'll try, I said. But Sarah, I need to be honest with you. She's very angry with me right now. She may not be ready. I don't care if she's ready, Sarah interrupted, and now I could hear the anger in her voice. I've spent 52 years not knowing I had a twin sister. I'm not waiting any longer. You kept us apart for 5 decades. The least you can do is bring us together now. She was right. I had kept them apart. This was my fault. And if I only had months left to live, I needed to fix this before I died. Okay, I said. I'll call Rebecca today. I'll see if she's willing to meet. Thank you, Sarah said. Then, before hanging up, and Dorothy, I don't know if I can ever forgive you for what you did, but I'm grateful you told the truth before you died. That's something at least. After she hung up, I sat with my phone in my hand for a long time. Then I called Rebecca. She didn't answer. I left a voicemail. Rebecca, honey, it's Mom. Sarah called me. Your sister called me. She wants to meet you. Please call me back. Please. She didn't call back that day, or the next day, or the day after that. I started to panic. What if Rebecca refused to meet Sarah? What if my dying wish to reunite my daughters before I died was something I wouldn't get to see? On the 4th day, Michael called me. Dorothy, it's Michael, he said. His voice was kind but firm. I'm calling on Rebecca's behalf. She's not ready to talk to you yet. But she wanted me to tell you that she does want to meet Sarah. She's just not ready to involve you in that meeting. My heart sank and soared at the same time. Sank because my daughter was cutting me out. Soared because she was going to meet her twin. I understand, I said. She also wanted me to tell you that she's angry and she needs space, but she still loves you. She's just not sure how to love you and be angry at you at the same time right now." "I understand that too," I said, tears running down my face. "Thank you for calling, Michael. Thank you for taking care of her." "She's my wife," he said simply. "It's what I do. But Dorothy? For what it's worth, I think you did a brave thing, telling the truth. A lot of people would have taken that secret to their grave." "A lot of people probably should," I said bitterly. "Maybe. But then Sarah and Rebecca never would have found each other. That's worth something." After we hung up, I realized he was right. Whatever damage my lie had caused, whatever pain my revelation had inflicted, at least my daughters would get to know each other. That was something I couldn't have given them by staying silent. Michael called me back 3 days later. "The meeting is set. This Sunday at noon at Renaissance Park in Charlotte. Neutral territory, public place. Rebecca asked if you'd like to be there." "Does she want me there?" I asked. "I think she needs you there," Michael said carefully. "To see you face both of your daughters at the same time. To understand what you've kept apart all these years." "I'll be there," I said. The drive to Charlotte that Sunday was the longest 3 hours of my life. I left Asheville early, taking Highway 74 through the mountains and then down into the Piedmont. The October leaves were changing colors, and any other day I would have found the drive beautiful. But that day, all I could think about was what was waiting for me at the end of the journey. Renaissance Park was lovely, a sprawling green space with walking trails and a lake. Michael had texted me the specific location, near the fountain in the main courtyard. I parked in the lot and walked slowly toward the fountain, my heart pounding so hard I thought I might be having a heart attack to go along with my lung cancer. Rebecca was already there, standing near the fountain with Michael's hand in hers. She was wearing a blue maternity dress, her pregnant belly prominent at 6 months along. She saw me coming and her face tensed, but she didn't walk away. "Hi, honey," I said softly when I reached her. "Hi, Mom." Her voice was neutral, carefully controlled. Michael squeezed her hand and said, "I'm going to go get coffee. Do you want anything?" "No, thank you," Rebecca said. He nodded at me politely and walked away, giving us space but staying within view. Rebecca and I stood there in awkward silence for a few minutes. Then she said, "She's not here yet. She texted that she's running a few minutes late." "Okay." More silence. Then Rebecca said, "I still haven't decided how I feel about all this, about you, about the lies, about having a sister I never knew." "That's fair," I said, "but I've spent the last week looking at her Facebook profile, looking at her pictures, and Mom." Her voice broke. "She looks exactly like me. It's eerie. It's like looking at an alternate version of myself. Same face, same smile, same expressions. She has 2 kids, did you know that? A boy and a girl, teenagers now, which means I have niece and nephew I've never met." "I didn't know," I said quietly. "She's a nurse. She works in labor and delivery at Presbyterian Hospital, which is ironic, don't you think? She delivers other people's babies, and she was delivered herself and then taken away from her twin." I didn't know what to say to that, so I said nothing. "I've been so angry at you," Rebecca continued. "So angry I couldn't sleep. But I've also been angry at myself for not figuring it out sooner. There were signs, weren't there? Things that didn't quite add up. But I just accepted your explanations because you were my mother, and I trusted you. I'm sorry," I said, and I meant it with every fiber of my being. "I'm so sorry. I know you are." She looked at me with those green eyes that were Thomas's and mine, and apparently Sarah's too. But sorry doesn't change the past 52 years. Before I could respond, a voice behind me said, "Rebecca." We both turned. There was a woman standing about 10 feet away, staring at Rebecca with an expression of complete shock. Sarah. She did look exactly like Rebecca. The same dark hair, though Sarah wore hers shorter. The same build, same height, same facial features. The same way of standing with her weight slightly shifted to one hip. If I hadn't known Rebecca was pregnant, I wouldn't have been able to tell them apart from behind. Rebecca took a step forward, then another. Sarah did the same. They met in the middle, standing face to face, and I watched as they studied each other with a hunger that made my chest ache. "Hi," Rebecca said, her voice shaking. "Hi," Sarah said back. Then they were hugging, both of them crying, and I stood there watching my daughters meet for the first time since they were 12 minutes old, and I cried too. They stayed like that for a long time, just holding each other. When they finally pulled apart, they were both laughing through their tears. "This is so weird," Rebecca said, wiping her face. "You look like me. You sound like me. Even your laugh sounds like mine." "I know," Sarah said. "I keep expecting to wake up and find out this is all a dream." They turned to look at me, standing awkwardly off to the side. The joy on their faces faded somewhat, replaced by something more complicated. "So," Sarah said, walking toward me, "you're our mother." "I'm one of your mothers," I said carefully. "Eleanor Whitmire was your mother too. She raised you. She loved you. I just gave birth to you." "She did love me," Sarah said. "She and my father, my adoptive father, they were good parents. I had a good childhood. They told me I was adopted when I was 8, said my birth mother was too young to keep me, and I accepted that. I never felt like I was missing anything." Until now, her tone implied. "Why didn't they tell me about Rebecca?" Sarah asked. "Why didn't they tell me I had a twin?" "I don't know," I said honestly. "Maybe they thought it would be too painful. Maybe they thought you'd want to find her and they wanted you to be just theirs. I don't know. They're both dead now, so we can't ask them." "Convenient," Sarah said, and there was bitterness in her voice. Rebecca stepped closer to Sarah, a protective gesture. "Sarah and I have been texting all week," she said to me, "getting to know each other. We have so much in common, Mom. It's not just how we look. We like the same foods, we have the same sense of humor, we even have the same nervous habits." Sarah bites her lip when she's thinking, just like I do. "Identical twins often have those similarities," I said softly. "Even when they're raised apart. Which makes what you did even worse," Rebecca said. "You separated two people who were literally genetically designed to be together. You cut Sarah out of my life before I even knew she existed." "I know." "Why?" Sarah asked. "I need to understand why. Your letter said you made an impossible choice, but I need more than that. I need to understand how a mother can give birth to twins and decide to keep one and give away the other." So I told them. Everything I'd already told Rebecca, but in more detail this time. I told them about the poverty, about the pressure from my parents, about Thomas's fear that we couldn't handle 2 babies. I told them about Mrs. Pritchard and the Whitmires and the belief that I was doing the right thing by giving 1 baby to a family that could provide more. "But you kept Rebecca," Sarah said. "Why her and not me?" "I didn't choose," I said. "I couldn't choose. I told the doctors to take you both away after birth, before I could see you clearly, before I could tell you apart. They brought Rebecca back first because she was baby A, the firstborn. And by the time they brought you back, the Whitmires were already there to take you. It all happened so fast. I didn't choose Rebecca over you. I just chose the order you were born. And that's only because that's how they brought you to me." Sarah was crying now. "So it was random. The entire course of my life was determined by which of us came out first." "Yes," I said. "I'm so sorry. I know that's not fair. None of this is fair." "You're right," she said. "It's not." We stood there, the 3 of us, in the October sunshine by the fountain, and I wondered if this was how it would end. With my daughters hating me, unable to forgive me, and me dying knowing I'd caused them pain even in trying to make things right. But then Rebecca said, "Mom's dying." Sarah looked at me sharply. "What?" "Lung cancer, stage 4. She has months left, not years. That's why she finally told the truth. She couldn't take the secret to her grave. Sarah processed this information, her expression shifting through several emotions I couldn't quite read. Finally, she said, "I don't forgive you. Not yet. Maybe not ever. What you did was wrong, and it cost me 52 years with my twin sister, but—" She paused, took a breath. "But I'm grateful you told the truth before you died. My parents took the secret to their graves, and I'll never get answers from them about why they didn't tell me about Rebecca. At least you gave us the chance to know each other while we're still young enough to build a relationship." "That's all I wanted," I said. "For you to know each other. For Rebecca to understand why she always felt like something was missing. For you to understand where you came from. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted to give you the truth." Rebecca walked over to me and took my hand. "I'm still angry at you," she said, "but you're still my mom, and you're dying, and I don't want the last months of your life to be spent with us not speaking." "Neither do I," said, squeezing her hand. Sarah hesitated, then joined us. She didn't take my other hand, but she stood close enough that I could smell her perfume, something floral and clean. "I want to get to know you both," she said. "Rebecca, I want to know everything about you, and Dorothy." She looked at me. "I want to understand who you were at 21, what made you make that choice, what your life has been like since. I want to understand, even if I can't forgive." "I'll tell you anything you want to know," I said. Michael came back with his coffee and stopped when he saw the three of us standing together. Rebecca waved him over. "Michael, this is Sarah. Sarah, this is my husband, Michael." "It's nice to meet you," Michael said, shaking Sarah's hand. Then he looked at me. "Hi, Dorothy." "Hi, Michael. Thank you for arranging this." "Thank me by making it right," he said. "All of it." We spent the next 3 hours in that park, talking. Sarah told us about her life, growing up in Winston-Salem, going to nursing school, marrying her husband David, who was a high school history teacher, having her 2 kids. Rebecca told Sarah about her life, growing up in Asheville, going to college for business administration, meeting Michael, being pregnant with twins. And I told them about the 52 years I'd carried the secret, about the birthdays where I lit 2 cupcakes but only gave one to Rebecca, about the times Rebecca asked for siblings, and I lied, about the constant guilt that colored everything, about Thomas knowing but never talking about it until he died and took his side of the secret to his grave. By the time the sun started to set, we'd exchanged phone numbers and email addresses and promised to stay in touch. Sarah and Rebecca had already made plans to meet again the following weekend, this time with Sarah's husband and kids, so Rebecca could meet her niece and nephew. As we were saying goodbye, Sarah turned to me one more time. "I have one question," she said. "Did you ever try to find me before the diagnosis?" I thought about lying, about saying yes to make myself look better. But I'd done enough lying. "No," I said. "I thought about it 1,000 times over the years, but I was afraid. Afraid you wouldn't want to know me. Afraid it would disrupt your life. Afraid of what it would do to Rebecca if she found out. So I kept the secret and told myself I was protecting everyone. It was only when I found out I was dying that I realized the secret was going to outlive me and cause even more damage. That's when I decided I had to tell the truth, no matter the consequences." Sarah nodded slowly. "At least you're honest about that." She paused. "I can't promise we'll have a relationship. I can't promise I'll come to visit you or want to be there when you—" She couldn't finish the sentence. "I understand," I said. "All I wanted was for you to know each other. That's enough." But Rebecca shook her head. "It's not enough. Mom, you're not getting off that easily. If you have 6 months left, I'm going to spend them with you. Not because I've forgiven you. I haven't. Not completely, but because you're my mom and I love you even when I hate what you did." "I love you too," I said, crying again. "I love both of you. I always have." Sarah didn't say she loved me back, and I didn't expect her to. But she did give me a brief, awkward hug before she left. Rebecca and I drove back to Asheville together, Michael following in his car. On the drive, Rebecca said, "I keep thinking about the fact that I'm having twins, and how I'll never have to make the choice you made because Michael and I are financially stable and we can handle 2 babies. And I don't know if that makes me lucky or if it makes your situation even more tragic." "Both, maybe," I said. "Promise me something," she said. "Promise me you'll be here when the babies are born. I need you to meet them. I need you to see that twins can stay together, that families can stay whole." "I promise I'll try," I said. "But Rebecca, I can't control how fast the cancer progresses." "Then fight," she said fiercely. "Fight to stay alive until February. Give me that. Please, I'll fight," I promised, and I meant it. The next 4 months were the hardest and the most beautiful of my life. The cancer progressed faster than the doctors expected. By November, I was on oxygen. By December, I couldn't walk more than a few feet without getting winded. By January, I was in hospice care at home, with nurses coming 3 times a day to check on me. But I also got to watch my daughters build a relationship with each other. Sarah and Rebecca talked every day, sometimes for hours. They discovered more similarities. Both of them loved old movies. Both of them were terrible at math. Both of them had recurring dreams about flying. They also discovered their differences. Sarah was more reserved where Rebecca was outgoing. Sarah preferred mountains where Rebecca loved the beach. Sarah was a morning person where Rebecca was a night owl. They video called each other constantly, comparing features, matching expressions. "Look, we both do this thing with our eyebrows when we're skeptical," Rebecca would say, "and we both have the same crooked pinky finger." Sarah brought her family to Asheville for Thanksgiving. Her son, James, was 15, and her daughter, Emma, was 13. They were good kids, polite and curious about their aunt they'd just discovered. Emma looked a lot like Sarah and Rebecca, with the same dark hair and green eyes. Sitting at my dining room table with all of them, Sarah and her family, Rebecca and Michael, all of us together, I felt a complicated mixture of joy and regret. Joy that they were finally together. Regret that it had taken 52 years. "Grandma Dorothy," Emma said at one point. "They'd decided the kids would call me Grandma Dorothy to distinguish me from their other grandmothers. Mom says you're sick. Are you going to get better?" "No, sweetie," I said gently. "I'm not going to get better. But I'm so happy I got to meet you before I die." She thought about that. "Mom also says you gave her away when she was a baby, and that's why we never knew about Aunt Rebecca." "That's true," I said. "That was mean," Emma said, with the brutal honesty of a 13-year-old. "Emma," Sarah said sharply. "No, she's right," I said. "It was mean. I made a choice that hurt a lot of people, including your mom. I'm sorry for that." Emma looked at me thoughtfully. "But if you hadn't given Mom away, she wouldn't have been my mom. She would have been Aunt Rebecca's sister who lived in Asheville, and I wouldn't exist because Mom would have had different kids." That stopped all conversation at the table. "That's true," Sarah said slowly. "If Dorothy had kept me, my whole life would have been different. I wouldn't have met David. James and Emma wouldn't exist." She looked at me. "So I guess I'm still angry at what you did, but I'm also grateful for the life I got. Does that make sense?" "It makes perfect sense," I said. Christmas was small, just Rebecca and Michael and me. I was too weak to go to Sarah's house in Charlotte, and she couldn't come to us because her in-laws were visiting. But we video called on Christmas morning, and I got to watch both my daughters open presents at the same time, even if we were in different houses. Sarah gave Rebecca a gift that made both of them cry. Matching necklaces with 2 interlocking circles representing their twin bond. Rebecca gave Sarah a framed photo from the day they met at Renaissance Park, both of them smiling, arms around each other, looking so alike it was impossible to tell them apart without the context of Rebecca's pregnant belly. In January, Rebecca's pregnancy complications started. She was diagnosed with preeclampsia and put on bed rest. The doctors said she'd need to deliver early maybe in late January instead of her February due date. You have to make it to the birth, she told me during one of her visits to my hospice bed. She was huge now, carrying twins high and round, and she couldn't get comfortable in the chair next to my bed. You have to meet them, Mom. Please. I'm trying, I said. And I was. Every day was a struggle. The morphine kept the pain manageable but made me foggy. I was sleeping 20 hours a day. The nurses said it could be any time now. Days, maybe a week or two at most. Sarah's coming next weekend, Rebecca said. She wants to see you before... She couldn't finish. Before I die, I said. You can say it, honey. I've accepted it. Well, I haven't, she said stubbornly. Sarah came that following Saturday with her whole family. She sat by my bed for an hour while I drifted in and out of consciousness. At one point, I woke to find her holding my hand. I need you to know something, she said quietly. I'm grateful for the life I had with my adoptive parents, for my husband and my kids, for all of it. And I'm grateful that you told the truth before you died. I'm not saying I've forgiven you completely, but I'm not angry anymore. That's something, right? That's everything, I whispered. The twins were born on January 28th at 3:00 p.m. by emergency C-section, a boy and a girl, 6 pounds 3 ounces and 5 pounds 14 ounces, both healthy despite being 3 weeks early. Rebecca named them James Thomas Morrison and Emily Rose Morrison. The nurses wheeled me to the hospital in an ambulance so I could meet them. I only had enough strength to hold them for a few minutes each, but those minutes were worth everything. I looked at James's tiny face and Emily's perfect little hands and thought about how these babies would grow up knowing each other, knowing they were twins, never separated, never lied to. Promise me, I said to Rebecca, my voice barely audible. Promise me you'll tell them the truth, about everything, about me, about Sarah, about the choice I made. I promise, Rebecca said. Sarah was there too, meeting her niece and nephew for the first time. She stood on the other side of my hospice bed, and for a moment, the three of us were together. Rebecca holding her babies, Sarah looking on, and me in the middle, dying but finally at peace. I'm glad we found each other, Sarah said to Rebecca. Me too, Rebecca said. And I'm glad you told us, Sarah said to me. Better late than never. Better late than never, I agreed. I died 3 days later on January 31st at 4:47 a.m. Rebecca was with me, holding my hand. Sarah came as soon as she heard but arrived 10 minutes too late. My funeral was small. Rebecca and Michael, Sarah and her family, a few old friends from Brevard who'd somehow survived into their 70s, some neighbors from Asheville. The pastor from Rebecca's church said nice things about me that were mostly true. But the most important part was what happened after the service. Rebecca and Sarah stood together by my grave, their arms around each other. And Rebecca said, she kept us apart for 52 years, but at least she brought us together in the end. That's more than some people get, Sarah said. And it was. It was more than some people get. It wasn't enough to make up for the decades of lies, but it was something. It was a truth told, a secret revealed, a relationship formed. It was two sisters who finally knew each other, who could build a future together even if they couldn't change the past. Now, looking back on this from whatever comes after death, I can see my whole life laid out like a map. I can see the choices I made, good and bad. I can see the moment I let Mrs. Pritchard take my daughter away, and I can see the moment I finally told the truth. I can see the pain I caused and the love I tried to give. I can see it all, and I understand that sometimes there are no good choices, only less terrible ones. I made a choice when I was 21 that affected the entire lives of 2 other people. For 52 years, I carried that choice like a weight around my neck. And then, at 73, with death staring me in the face, I finally found the courage to tell the truth. Was it too late? Maybe. Probably. But Rebecca and Sarah are building a relationship now. They talk every day. They're planning a vacation together this summer with both their families. They're making up for lost time. And that's what I want to say to anyone listening to this story. It's never too late to tell the truth. It's never too late to make things right. It might be painful. People might be angry. You might lose relationships you thought were solid. But living with a secret is its own kind of death, a slow suffocation that kills you piece by piece over decades. I don't know if Rebecca ever fully forgave me. I don't know if Sarah would have, given more time. But I know that telling the truth was the right thing to do, even if I should have done it 51 years earlier. If you're carrying a secret that's weighing you down, if you're living a lie that's eating you from the inside, I'm here to tell you, speak up. Tell the truth. Face the consequences. Because whatever happens, it's better than the alternative. It's better than dying with that weight still on your chest. I kept a secret for 52 years, and it almost destroyed my relationship with my daughter. But I told the truth before I died, and because of that, my daughters have each other. That's my legacy. Not the lie, but the truth I finally found the courage to speak. And if you're watching this from wherever you are, Rebecca and Sarah, I want you to know, I'm sorry for the years I stole from you. I'm sorry for the childhood you didn't get to share, for the memories you didn't get to make together. But I'm grateful that you found each other in the end. I'm grateful that you have twins of your own, both of you now, since Sarah just told me last week that Emma is pregnant with twins too, and that you can raise them together, showing them what sisterhood should look like. It's never too late, remember that. Whatever truth you're hiding, whatever secret you're carrying, it's never too late to speak up. It might be hard, it might be painful, but it's worth it. For you, and for everyone whose lives are tangled up in your silence. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for not judging me too harshly. And most of all, thank you for understanding that sometimes the hardest thing to do is also the right thing. Now, if you've made it this far in my story, if you've listened to every word of this journey, I want to ask you something. This story, painful and complicated as it is, it's real. It's my truth. And if it moved you, if it made you think about your own secrets or your own regrets, I'd be so grateful if you'd let me know. Hit that like button to show you we're here, that you listened, that you care about real stories from real women like me. And if you haven't subscribed yet, please do. There are so many more stories like mine that need to be told. Stories of women who made mistakes and found redemption, who lived through impossible situations and came out stronger. Drop a comment telling me what you thought, or just tell me what city or country you're watching from. It helps us build this incredible community of listeners who support each other. Every like, every comment, every subscription helps these stories reach more people who need to hear them. Thank you for being here. Thank you for caring. And thank you for being part of something bigger than just entertainment. You're part of a community of women supporting women, and that means everything.